Once upon a time, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, there lived a teenage girl named Hope. She'd been eagerly looking forward to a sleepover at her friend Ava's house, but her parents were vehemently against it. They had warned her time and time again about venturing out late at night, especially to Ava's house, which they considered too far from the safety of their own home. Hope's pleas grew more and more desperate, and after a day filled with endless arguments, her parents finally caved. With reluctance, they allowed her to spend one night at Ava's. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Hope set out, her heart brimming with excitement. Unbeknownst to Ava, Hope had also invited a couple of boys to join them. It was a secret plan she had hatched without her friends' knowledge, seeking to turn a simple sleepover into an unforgettable adventure. The boys arrived late in the evening, and Ava was taken aback by their sudden appearance. Hope assured Ava that everything would be fine, that it would be a night to remember. Ava, though apprehensive, tried to make the best of the situation and reluctantly accepted their unexpected guests. She was a good friend after all, and didn't want to spoil Hope's fun. As the hours passed, the atmosphere in Ava's house began to change. Laughter and chatter filled the rooms as the teenagers shared stories and played games. But something was amiss. Ava couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control. She knew her parents would be furious if they found out about the uninvited guests. Hope, intoxicated by the thrill of rebellion, encouraged the boys to push the boundaries. They started raiding Ava's family liquor cabinet, drinking to excess, and causing a ruckus throughout the house. Ava grew increasingly uncomfortable, her initial reluctance turning into genuine fear. She didn't recognize her once trusted friends in this chaotic nightmare. As the night wore on, the behavior of the boys escalated, and Hope seemed powerless to stop them. They began vandalizing Ava's house, breaking valuable items, and laughing maniacally. Ava's home, once a place of comfort and solace, was now a battleground of chaos and destruction. Desperate, Ava finally confronted Hope, begging her to intervene and put an end to the madness. But Hope, under the influence and overwhelmed by the situation, was incapable of regaining control. The boys had gone too far, and the night had spiraled into a full-fledged nightmare. Ava fled to her room, her heart pounding, seeking refuge from the terror that had taken over her own home. Alone and frightened, she tried to reach her parents, but they were too far away to help. She sat in the dark, praying for morning to come, and wondering how the friends she trusted had turned into such monsters. In the cold light of dawn, the boys finally left, leaving behind a scene of devastation. Hope, sobering up, was filled with remorse for her actions, but it was too late to undo the damage. Ava's parents returned home, devastated to find their house in shambles and their daughter traumatized. The incident left scars that would never fully heal. Ava's friendship with Hope was forever tainted, and her home had become a place of lingering fear. The true horror of that night wasn't in the chaos caused by the boys, but in the betrayal and despair that Ava felt at the hands of those she once considered friends. And so, the quiet suburban neighborhood was forever changed by a night of chaos and destruction, where the innocence of youth turned into a harrowing experience that would haunt Ava for the rest of her days, a stark reminder that sometimes the true horrors of the world can be found, not in the supernatural, but in the actions of those we thought we knew. In a quiet suburban neighborhood nestled at the edge of a dense, dark forest, 3 boys named Tom, Mike, and David had been inseparable childhood friends. They were known for their adventurous spirits and daring antics, which often landed them in peculiar situations. One ominous night, their friendship would be tested in ways they couldn't have fathomed. David's house was the chosen venue for their impromptu sleepover. It was a quaint, 2-story house with creaky floorboards and a history shrouded in mystery. David was unaware of the sinister plans his friends had in store. The trio had decided to engage in something they knew little about. They intended to use an Ouija board, a device believed to connect with spirits from the other side. As the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across the walls of David's house, They gathered in the dimly lit living room. The atmosphere was tense, and an unsettling chill permeated the air. Mike produced the Ouija board he had secretly brought, and their innocent curiosity began to evolve into something much more sinister. Tom and Mike persuaded David to join them, but he hesitated. There was something about the board that unnerved him. The room felt colder, and shadows seemed to dance ominously in the corners of his vision. Reluctantly, David agreed, and they all placed their hands on the planchette. The board came to life, the planchette gliding smoothly across the letters. Their questions started innocently enough, but the answers grew increasingly cryptic and chilling. The room grew even colder, and an eerie silence settled around them. "What's your name?" they asked. The planchette slowly spelled out, Samuel. "Are you a good spirit?" they inquired. The board's response was swift and unnerving, spelling out Notsogod. Nervous laughter filled the room, but it did little to dispel the growing unease. David, feeling increasingly unsettled, suggested they stop, but Tom and Mike were determined to continue. As they delved deeper into their questions, the atmosphere grew heavier. The planchette moved rapidly and erratically, spelling out sinister words and threats. Shadows in the room began to twist and contort, taking on grotesque forms. The house itself seemed to groan in protest, as if the very walls were alive and listening. In a panic, David pleaded with his friends to stop, but they were entranced by the board, unable to pull away from its malevolent grasp. The planchette spelled out ominous phrases like, "Leave now, and you shouldn't have come." The room filled with an oppressive darkness, and the air grew thick with an otherworldly presence. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a deafening crash echoed from the kitchen. The boys jumped, their hearts pounding, and David insisted they put an end to this terrifying game. But as they tried to release their hands from the planchette, it resisted, holding them in an iron grip. Desperation clawed at David as he realized they were trapped, and the Ouija board was in control. The shadows in the room converged into a swirling, sinister figure that materialized in front of them. The specter spoke with a chilling, disembodied voice. "I was wronged," it whispered, sending shivers down their spines. "Now, you shall pay." The room plunged into complete darkness, and their terrified screams filled the void. When the lights finally returned, the Ouija board had disappeared, leaving David, Tom, and Mike traumatized and disoriented. Days turned into weeks, and the three friends were never the same again. The incident haunted their every waking moment and tormented their dreams. David's house became a place of dread, and the bonds of their friendship had been irrevocably scarred. The events of that night were a chilling reminder that some mysteries should remain untouched. The Ouija board had unleashed a malevolent force they couldn't comprehend, and it had forever altered their lives. David, Tom, and Mike learned the hard way that some doors, once opened, could never be closed, and some horrors, once witnessed, could never be forgotten. Grace had been dating Mike for a few months, and they decided to have a sleepover at his house. It was a quaint little cottage nestled in the woods, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. Everything was going well, and they were enjoying their evening together. Little did they know that a chilling presence lurked nearby. There was a man who lived in the area, a recluse, and locals referred to him as Old Man Tucker. He was known to be eccentric and eerie, rarely seen in the daylight. Tucker had an unsettling reputation, and the townspeople often whispered about his strange habits and peculiar interests. He was the talk of the town, a source of eerie stories and unsettling legends. Grace had heard these stories, but she never believed they held any truth. On that fateful sleepover night, Grace and Mike decided to watch a scary movie to add a little excitement to their evening. The rain pelted the windows, casting eerie shadows across the room, but they were safe inside, wrapped in cozy blankets. The movie played, and their laughter filled the air, chasing away any hint of unease. As the night wore on, the storm outside grew more intense. Thunder rumbled like an angry beast, and lightning tore through the dark sky. Mike got up to grab some snacks from the kitchen, leaving Grace alone on the couch. She pulled the blanket tighter around her, feeling a sudden shiver crawl up her spine. Just as Mike reached the kitchen, the power went out. Grace was plunged into darkness, her heart racing as she called out for Mike. Silence met her cries, and an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. She strained her eyes, trying to pierce the inky blackness. The only sound was the relentless rain, tapping against the windows like bony fingers. In the pitch-black house, Mike fumbled for his phone to use its flashlight. He moved cautiously back to the living room, his steps hesitant. But when the light from his phone cut through the darkness, it revealed a sight that sent shivers down his spine. Grace was no longer on the couch. Panicked, Mike called out for her, his voice trembling. There was no response. He raced through the house, searching every corner, every room. But Grace was nowhere to be found. The house, which had once been their sanctuary, now felt like a sinister labyrinth. Meanwhile, Old Man Tucker, who had been watching from the shadows outside, had seized his opportunity. With a sinister grin, he'd crept into the house while the power was out, using the storm's chaos as cover. He had silenced Mike, knocked him unconscious, and stolen Grace away. As Mike awoke, battered and bruised, he realized the full extent of the horror that had unfolded. Grace was gone, and the realization sent shockwaves of terror through his body. Desperation fueled his determination as he contacted the police and reported the abduction. A frantic search began, but there was no trace of Grace or Old Man Tucker. Days turned into weeks, and still, Grace remained missing. Her family, friends, and Mike were plunged into a seemingly endless nightmare, haunted by the uncertainty of her fate. The town was gripped with fear, and Old Man Tucker remained elusive, lurking in the shadows. The sleepover that was meant to be a fun and memorable night had turned into a horrifying tale of suspense, grief, and unanswered questions. The legend of Old Man Tucker took on a darker, more sinister dimension as he continued to elude capture, leaving everyone in the town to wonder if Grace would ever return, or if she had become another chilling story to be whispered about in the dead of night.